Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. This is our third webinar of our Winter Organic Grain webinar series. So thank you for taking the time to join this space, this learning space with us. My name is Katie Bishop. I am the Organic Grain Mentorship Coordinator with the Land Connection. I'm also an organic grain farmer at Prairie Earth Farm in central Illinois with my husband Hans. We raise grain and we also raise bedding plants. We used to grow a whole lot of vegetables and grain, and now we're just grain. Okay, so before we get started with this panel of great farmers, I'd like to begin by just really briefly sharing the mission of the Land Connection. So our work is to train farmers in resilient restorative farming techniques, inform the public about where our food comes from and why that matters, and protect and enhance the farmland that we do have so that generations to come can have this clean air and water and fertile soil and healthy and delicious food. So we carry this work forward through three core areas of focus: healthy farms, healthy food, and healthy communities. And while my work primarily focuses on organic grain in this mentorship program that we offer, the Land Connection supports farmers through business and farmer training programs, field days, and scholarships. We have an organic grain conference and host the Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day. And then beyond the farm, we also support our local food systems through a farmers market that we have in Champaign, Illinois, food access work, and a lot of community education. So our goal is to help people better understand where that food is coming from and then increasing the access to it. And then finally, through our Illinois Farm Link program, we connect farmers looking for land with landowners that are looking for farmers. So our goal is to help keep family farms active and rural communities financially and culturally strong. So thank you for being here tonight. Just so you know, your participation supports all of this work that we're doing. So a quick note for our Zoom logistics. I am going to let our amazing panelists introduce themselves. But if you can, please keep yourself on mute. And if you have questions, I'd like to try and hold those until the end. If you need clarification or something repeated, feel free to put it in the chat or share your own thoughts in the chat. That's fine. But we have a series of questions and a great conversation. And my guess is that sometimes those questions might end up getting answered throughout the conversation that we're having. But if you do have a question and you want to put it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual Zoom hand or just take yourself off mute. Okay. So today we are going to be hearing from Vicki Rennick and Molly Breslin and Shane Bailey. And I'm actually going to invite them to briefly introduce themselves and share a little bit about their farm, about their life, about all of the things grain farming, and then we're going to dive into some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and why don't we start with Vicki?
Hi everyone, my name is Vicki Rennick. I live in LaGrange, Illinois, and I farm about 70 miles west of here in Leland, Illinois. I took over a 15-acre conventional farm that was corn and soy for about 20 years maybe. And I am transitioning to organic. I was a member of the TOPS program. My mentor was Paul Hoffman, which worked out really great. He's in Irville, which is not too far from me, and he has a wealth of experience. Some of the reasons why I chose organic was because I saw the inputs being used on our farm and I didn't really like that. So now I have control and I've been keeping the soil covered, eliminating erosion, and I'm really excited. This year is my third year of growing alfalfa, so I meet the 3-year requirement of having no chemicals put on the soil so that I can certify organic this year. I'm also working with the NRC in Ottawa, and I am putting in a 40-foot buffer with some different mixed grasses to kind of help some of the farmers that do work on my farm aren't organic. So this, I'm hoping, will help eliminate a lot of the particulates from some of the sprays they use and to help keep my certification. I've been at this for 5 years. I really enjoy baking. And when I realized I could grow wheat in Illinois instead of just corn and soy, I jumped in with both feet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vicki. Molly.
Hi, my name's excuse me. My name's Molly Breslin, and my farm is called Breslin Farms because that's what my dad and I could agree on. He and I started farming together. Neither of us grew up on the farm, but we started farming together on some land of my mom's in 2010. So we are, and we immediately transitioned to organic. And we'll talk more about that later. So we've been certified organic since 2012. It was a conventional corn and soybean farm, and we didn't really know what we were doing when we started. But we really kind of chose grains partly because that's the equipment that was available to us. That was what was made most sense based on the infrastructure that we had access to, and we settled into growing a pretty wide variety of row crops, no forages, and we tried to focus on food grade whenever possible, including heirloom when possible. And we learned a lot about working with heirloom corn and dry beans in the process. So we have grown winter wheats, rye, corn, dry beans, soybeans, sunflowers, oats, alfalfa, clover, though we haven't harvested any clover, and a little bit of garlic on the side. But within each of those categories, there are many different varieties. So on any given year, we might have 10 different kinds of things going on 80 acres. So it's a pretty small operation. And we've been selling both bulk. We sold through a co-op. We've sold direct to I've sold everything from truckloads to half-pound bags. And I have many opinions about those things too. So right now my dad has moved on. He got old and his knees hurt. He's not farming too much anymore. My childcare requirements have gotten in the way of my farming. So right now I'm not farming, and our neighbor is renting our farm for this year, and is not currently certified organic, but and we actually just gave up our organic certification, which was like a big blow, because he wasn't ready yet to do certified organic. But it is not being farmed conventionally. It's being farmed in a way that will make it so that we can go back to organic at any time. So that's where I am right now.
Wonderful. So I also, and Shane, I invite you to, when you share this too, I think it's really important to understand the context in which you're farming with your life. So Vicki, I know you have kids, right? And a job outside of farming. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're farming and you're working and you're raising children and
yes, and hoping they become interested in it, which they have. They're learning, and there's so much they can do with it. So I'm hoping it, continues on.
And Molly, you just mentioned that you're also we're farming and raising. I know you have. I know Molly well enough to know that you had kiddos and you were farming at the same time. Did you have an off-farm job?
So I have had various off-farm jobs. Right now I have about a half-time job doing bookkeeping. And I have a fourth grader and a 4-year-old. So since the 4-year-old was born, I haven't been very effective at farming. Turns out 2 kids is a lot more than one. And also at the same time, my husband got a job out of town. So that also affected my ability to farm, because farming just on the weekends, it turns out, is hard.
Thank you for sharing that context. I think it's important for people to understand the entire ecosystem that we farm in sometimes. And Shane, please, I'm excited to hear about your ecosystem too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, my name's Shane Bailey. I own and operate Savannah Ridge Farms in Indianola, Illinois, with my dad. Indianola is about 30 miles south of Danville, just in southern Vermilion County. I also have a younger brother who works full time with us as well. Right now, I'm farming white corn, soybeans, and oats, all organically. Um, our farm is 100% organic. I say 100% organic. I have a field coming out of transition this year, and then a new field that I just acquired last summer that's going into transition this year. So the whole farm's either certified organic or in transition. A farm just shy of 700 acres right now, and I started, gosh, when was it? Started organic transition in 2016. Um, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but my transition strategy, I did it like a complete crazy person and essentially put 90% of the farm in transition at once, stuck it in an alfalfa hay cover crop for 2 years and didn't touch it. Um, which worked, but the cash flow on that was extremely tight. Um, Also, as part of our farming operation, we have a, 70 head yak herd that we rotationally graze over part of, or we rotationally graze over a couple of our fields as part of our crop rotation throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And we also have a direct-to-consumer meat sales business for the yak meat that we sell right off our website, and we ship to all lower 48 states. So that's really picked up in the last couple of years with that.
And you have a kiddo?
Yes, yes, I do. Yes, I have a 7-month-old son named Sawyer. He's been out to the farm to do chores a couple times, but he's not a great gate opener yet, but we're working on him. Um, yeah, and I guess also to mention too, I started farming when I was 16 as a 50-50 partner with my dad, and we've been able to grow the operation kind of incrementally and strategically since then. But I had, farming through high school, college, and then after college, I had a day job. I call it a day job for the first, I guess, till 2018 is when I was able to come back and farm full time. So it was a lot of nights, weekends, all the above there for a couple years. But I was fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunity to come back and farm full time in 2018.
Great. Well, thank you all. It's really interesting to hear your different paths, but the similarities in so many different ways. And I think we'll probably see that through some of these questions here. So I'd love to kind of begin with what sits underneath that decision itself. You know, beyond the markets and the premiums that organic offers, and some of you kind of touched on this a little bit, I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper. What mattered most to you in choosing to become certified organic? And Molly, I know you're not currently, but you were for quite a while, so we'll just assume that you are and will be again someday. So yeah, what was most important to you?
Yeah, I think when I first got the idea of transition to organic, I mean, soil health has been a cornerstone of our farming operation from day one. I mean, prior to transitioning to organic, I'd been 100% no-till for probably almost a decade. And I really liked that system, but that system had some flaws. I really didn't like the amount of herbicides that we were having to spray to get not even great weed control in a lot of years. So that's what kind of turned me into organic, is basically putting the soil first. And it was a multi-pronged approach actually, because it was, soil health is extremely important. But also, being organic, it gave me and also my younger brother the ability to come back to the farm and farm full time, which has, that's been my dream since I was 16 years old.
Yeah, that's actually what we hear a lot from a lot of mentees is that, they might be farming with their family on a conventional farm, but their opportunity to actually have a stake in it or to excuse me, to have some ownership of the actual farm, to be able to even potentially leave their day job to farm
Yeah.
full time, is that additional revenue stream through certification. So, yeah. What about you guys? What about you other two?
Yeah, we never considered farming conventionally. We started specifically with the idea of farming organic. I mean, I went to college in California in the 90s, so there was a big organic movement happening there, and that's why I learned about organic. and and basically I was fully sold. Between the like resource management aspects, treating the soil, wildlife habitat, insect habitat, the interrelatedness of the soil and the flora and the fauna, and managing for the long term. I actually have a minor in forestry. And so I always think of, and forestry is basically just farming on a much longer time scale. And so it kind of gives you the long view, in forestry, when you plant something, you might not harvest it for 100 or 150 years. And so I like to think of the farming that we do as similar. I'm managing for 100 years from now. And my dad was also fully on board. We had both worked on like organic vegetable farms. And so we were, I mean, the fact that the NOP now exists. So back in the day, the NOP kind of came in after I was introduced to organic. And the fact that it now exists and there was standardization just meant that it was more feasible. Also, prices when we started farming were much better. So like organic corn prices in 2012 were a lot better than they are now. Partly because a lot of the bigger operations, sort of bigger middlemen, the bigger buyers hadn't gotten into it and pushed the prices down and started importing from other places. So now there's more support, and I would say there are more markets available in some ways, but also the price pressure is a little tighter than it was, 10 or 15 years ago. But anyway, we were I'm healthy soil makes healthy plants, makes healthy people, makes clean water, makes healthy ecosystems. We're all in for the interconnectedness.
Vicky.
I would say for me, I'm relatively new compared to the other two panelists, but I was always curious. I did pay a premium in the store for organic. And when I did have children, that became, I tried to make sure they were eating as healthy as they could. And it seemed like organic was the way. And then watching the farm we owned, we leased it for a while to a conventional farmer, and they were always spraying. And it looked like the soil was getting drier. It looked like we were getting pooling in certain areas, and it was getting worse and worse each year. And then, they wanted us to install drainage tiles. And it was just really curiosity. One thing led to another. With COVID, I realized flour shortages. Where does flour come from? We can grow grain here. I bought a small mill from Pleasant Hill. I joined Midwest Grid. I went to Ohio, saw it growing. And then it just makes more sense to be organic. To go back to einkorn, emmer, spelt, where you see the genetics and you see some correlation in dietary needs and gluten. So for me, I'm so curious. I believe this is building the soil health. I'm so interested in the soil test that we'll do each year with the alfalfa. Watch how it, allows the water to permeate better. We are already seeing in year 3 we have like almost no wet spots anymore. Everything is kind of consistent. There are more bugs and, beautiful butterflies coming into our land now. It seems healthier. I think we've sweetened the soil in a sense. We've made it better. And I think the crops I can harvest from this field are going to be just great. They're going to taste great. They're going to be good for you. And everyone's going to be super excited to try these ancient grains.
Vicky, where do you plan to sell your grain?
Uh,
What's your plan with that? Because you are new, but that's such a I just want to say, especially for the mentees that are this year's crop of mentees through their mentorship program, hearing from you is so valuable. So I don't want to discredit your newness. I think it actually is perfect that you're here with this perspective too. Okay, so I just want to put that in. But yeah, what's your plan for that?
I live in an urban area, and the more I talk to people, the more I educate them. I'm getting requests all the time. When can I buy your flower? When can I buy your flower? So, it's really about getting the marketing and the education out there. And once I do that, I think I can sell whatever I can grow. I'm pretty sure, I only have only but 15 acres. I think I can make this work.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, let's shift from the why. You all have a lot of similarities. Yourselves, right? Your land, your families. But what about the day to day, those day to day pressures, the realities of farming organically that I think a lot of farmers worry about, both currently organic, those in transition, but also there's a lot of farmers who are considering organic or even just curious about it. And these are the things like, you know, well, the big two, weeds and record keeping are the big two that I hear their concerns about. And so let's get the weeds out into the open. Let's talk about weed pressure. When weeds start to show up, well, I mean, they're always there, but when the pressure really starts to show up, what are some of those first management decisions that you turn to? And I would also like to add, while you're considering that, how has your relationship with weeds changed over the time that you've maybe even pre-farming or growing up on a farm or seeing a farm, thinking about weeds to now? How is that evolved?
Maybe you should take this one first, Shane.
Yeah, I can. I'll gladly do it. Yep. So I guess you know, management decisions when it comes to weeds. Weeds are tough, especially in organic, and any organic farmer, that's probably going to be their first gripe or first complaint. But over the years of doing this, I've realized that, weed management starts the second after you plant. If you're able to get ahead of the weeds or even control weeds when they're smaller or before they become a problem, it makes everything so much easier throughout the growing season. So I do several blind weeding passes with a rotary hoe, and this year actually I just purchased a tine weeder to try to help that kind of that pre-cultivation weed management. But yeah, I've learned the hard way a couple years that if you let weeds get even the same size as the crop they're growing in, they become a lot harder to manage. So really early season management before it's a big problem is absolutely crucial to successful weed control. And I guess my relationship with weeds and how it's changed over time. I don't know. I'm still fighting them. Every year's different. It's a battle. Every year has different growing conditions, which change the weed pressure dramatically. So, but I guess weeds aren't always a bad thing if you look at it from just straight biomass perspective. It's still biomass. It's still living or growing in the soil, even though that's a plant that you don't want there.
I always like to think about it too. If elimination of weeds is your only measure of success, then you're missing out on the profitability that you still are making with your premiums, or the lack of inputs that you're buying, or whatever it is. So if we're only measuring success by how clean your fields look, then we're missing, I think, another big part of that picture too.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I mean, if a clean field is your only measurement of success, some years in organic farming, you're going to drive yourself absolutely crazy because you'll get a rain when you should have cultivated and you didn't get cultivated in time, and you're just going to have some weeds, and that's just a fact some years.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, my 4-year-old is really into Frozen right now, and "Let It Go" is a very good theme song for for all of your hang-ups about weeds. Like if you're thinking about doing organic, you just have to let those go, which doesn't mean that you don't deal with the weeds, you know. We're doing usually like 2 or 3 passes before planting, or we're tilling, we're cultivating, and then we're like letting the weeds sprout, and then we're cultivating again and letting the weeds sprout, and then cultivating right before planting, and then we're rotary hoeing, and then we're row cultivating if we're doing row crops as opposed to drilled crops. We didn't haven't gotten had never gotten a tine weeder, and so that's a place where we could use some or our weed control could use some help. But I would say you mentioned record keeping and weeds, and I would say weeds are a much bigger issue than record keeping for me.
Yes. Yes.
Because the weeds just keep coming.
Yeah.
But I also, like, right now my whole farm is covered in weeds because nothing happened out there last year, and I just think of it as a volunteer cover crop. I and a lot of times I'm like specifically letting things grow up and not cutting it off until it is depending on the season. I'm not cutting it off until it's about to go to seed, because I'm trying to sap as much energy out of it as possible, or add as much biomass as possible, as Shane mentioned. And I think one of the things that I wish that we had a better solution to is I wish that we could have a longer rotation and have 2 or 3 years of alfalfa in the rotation. We don't have any haying equipment, and it's hard to get somebody near us to do it, because our farm is fairly small and we have it broken up into like 3, 4, usually 4 main sections, 4 main fields in any given year. And so, the part that would need to be in the longer rotation would be maybe, like 20 acres or something. So it's harder to get somebody to come and do the haying. And then, we don't have any storage. So when we started our farm, it's just a piece of ground with nothing on it but a little laneway. So we built a shed, we put in electricity, we put in 2 bins, but we don't have like a lot of like an old farmstead a lot of times has like a bunch of different buildings, and this one could be converted to hay storage or whatever. And we don't have that. We don't have a well. So watering stuff isn't really an option. So we were just working with what we have. And so that's why we haven't put hay in the rotation, but I think that would be actually haying would be great for our soil and great for our weed control if we could find a way to work it into our rotation. So that's something that I wish that we could do better, along with dealing with weeds, having a piece of equipment like a tine weeder to deal with weeds in a drilled grain crop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that tine weeder. I think most of you guys know I'm not a born and bred farmer. I married into a farming family. So and while I have been married to this farming family for a while, it still surprises me how much farmers love equipment, man. They just love it. So if you love equipment, organic grain farming is perfect for you, because there's tons and tons of implements and weed control equipment that you can purchase that, wow. Yeah. Don't let my husband hear me saying any of this. I don't want him to know like I'm on to you. I know. I
do have one other thing to add about weeds, which is that when we started, we were like, there's no way that we're going to be able to hand weed all these soybeans. We start at one end of the farm it's
Oh
going to
yeah.
be
No.
October by the time we get to the other end of the farm.
Right.
So we hired a landscaper to come in on off days when he didn't have a job, and he brought his whole crew. And I was like, God, this is a lot of work and this is really expensive. Mom, how did you used to do it when you were growing up on the farm? And she grew up on a farm, and, there were 5 kids, and they always told stories about walking the beans. And then it came out that my grandpa used to have them walk the beans up into the little hill where you could see from the road. And then after that, they just left it because the neighbors couldn't see.
Right? Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, actually. Like making sure the visible spots. Yeah. What about you, Vicky? How do you feel about what's your approach to weeds? What does that look like on your farm?
I'm in the minority. The hay, like you said, Molly, I don't have a weed issue with the alfalfa in year at all. The first 2 years, and probably not this year. The small trial I did with wheat suppresses weeds very well. I, grew it by hand, but I can't say that I really fought them yet. But I do think they speak to me. So when I see a weed, I do have a little book that I, bring out. I look at it and I see like the soil is deficient in this if this weed is popular. So I find all of that so fascinating.
Yeah. And Vicky, your fields were conventional before. Is that right? And
Yes.
was there any fallow time between the time that you planted the alfalfa and the time, like, was there a time in between that?
No, they took soybeans off in, I want to say July or August. And then uh, I planted the alfalfa. No, there might have been some fallow season,
I
but the
find
alfalfa,
sometimes, oh, go ahead.
the alfalfa has been fairly weed free.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's good.
Did
Sometimes
you find
I
it too?
have found that first couple of years after conventional, there's still a little residue and the weeds are a little bit more managed. That isn't just, I'm not trying to say you've got anything to worry about. I'm just, sometimes if anybody else out there is in the process of transition, the first couple of years aren't actually all that bad if you're taking it out of a conventional operation, just because you do still have some of that out of control. All right, so let's stay with these practical things. Molly, you kind of briefly talked about your rotation, but can you talk about the rotation that really works, like on your farm? Have you and tried some stuff that maybe didn't work, and why?
Um, we have not mastered spring planted small grains. We just have not been able to keep the weeds down in spring planted small grains, and so we have only done winter planted small grains. Um, wonder if I think I've got a sample rotation. If you want, I can share this sample rotation that I found in my old slideshow. If that would be helpful.
Yeah, let me make you a host here.
Okay. Um, so we are basically doing like a soybeans small grain, interseeding clover or alfalfa with the small grain, um, and then actually plowing that using moldboard plow, plowing that down, planting corn, usually seeding radishes or turnips, or um, ideally mixed with something else, maybe rye or whatever we have that's affordable as a cover into the corn, which we've sometimes done like at last cultivation, or by flying it on, which isn't nearly as expensive as I expected it to be. And then doing dry beans after that. So usually like we'll do soybeans and then dry beans, sort of in alternating spots in the bean spot in the rotation. So it's like a 3-year rotation, but plus some variety. And I'll see if I can share that now. If that'll show up. That yeah, there we go. Um, so you can sort of see. Sorry, I just like picked a slide out there. But for those of you who are visual learners, that's kind of how we have been doing it. And it's a pretty basic rotation. And I wish that we could leave this alfalfa for, when we put that in, I wish that we could leave it much longer. I also think that we would be better as a holistic system if we had some animals in a managed way. Obviously, there are animals out there, but if we were using animals as in a rotational grazing pattern, I think we'd be doing a lot better job. But how do I get out of the sharing now? Oh, here we go.
Thank you for sharing that. So do you have any that didn't work? Anything that you've tried in that rotation that you're like, no, we're not doing that again?
Oats and alfalfa. The alfalfa overtook the oats because we didn't have any swathing capability. So swathing dry beans didn't work. So swathing is basically like for anybody who hasn't done this before, is basically cutting everything off and putting it in a pile the way you would with alfalfa, but you're doing it with like a small grain, for instance, or a bean or a pea. So some folks will plant like peas and oats together, swath them, let them dry, and then come with a pickup head on a combine and pick all that stuff up and harvest them together, and then separate it. Either sell them together as feed or separate them. You put it through some kind of seed cleaning to separate those two, and then sell them separately. So when we've done alfalfa in oats, the alfalfa totally overtook the oats. I don't know if that's just because we weren't that good at it, or if it was the year the alfalfa took over and then the oats just kind of had to be, we didn't get much out of them. Again, the spring planted grains, oats being one of them, but spring wheat, we have not mastered. I'm not saying it can't work in any system. I'm just saying we haven't done that well yet. I don't know. The neighbor sometimes complains that there are turnips growing in his eaves after we have the helicopter put the turnips on, but he hasn't sued us or anything yet. So.
Oh man.
Great, thank you.
Great. I guess kind of my crop rotation right now. I guess the last couple years I've done oats underseeded with red clover, and then followed that with corn the following year. Um, and that system has worked. I know I've had some of the same struggles Molly's had with getting the oats in the springtime, can be a struggle. And then 2 years ago, I had a field of oats where the red clover was taller than the oats were. And we got it combined, but it was a challenge to get that combined. But hasn't been every year, but we've had some absolute struggles growing that spring small grain. This year I added soybeans into my crop rotation. I quit raising soybeans 4 or 5 years ago, strictly because I was really frustrated with the weed control. I was throwing the kitchen sink at weed control. We have a neighbor that has a weed zapper, and we were having him zap our beans, at least twice. And it was just it was a struggle, and I was worried that if I let that weed pressure build up, every other year, every third year on that soybean crop, in 10 years, the field wouldn't be farmable because it'd just be all foxtail. So I took beans out for, 4 or 5 years and did the corn and red clover and oats rotation, which actually that really did work. Having the oats having the red clover behind the oats really help with weed control. I'm able to go in and I'll mow that red clover once or twice in the summertime after the oats have been harvested, and that helps keep a lot of the weeds, specifically grass weeds, down. Um, so that's been great. I'm looking at adding soybeans on a few more acres this next year. Last year I just kind of dipped my toes back into it, and It went fairly well. We had a couple small ugly spots, but overall, it was a success. So I'm looking to add more soybean acres back into the rotation this year. Um, I guess one crop or crop rotation that failed. Um, Gosh, I lose track of time. It's probably 5 or so years ago. I tried to do field peas as part of either to take the place of a small grain or just add that in the rotation with everything else. And I did almost 40 acres of field peas. Planted them in the spring. They came up. They looked great. They were weed free. And in the middle of the May, the whole field died. And I had agronomists come out to the field. I had the seed company I bought the peas from came out to the field. No one could figure out exactly what happened. My best guesstimate is I think I'm a little too far south, maybe, to grow peas on a regular basis. But so yeah, so that 40 acres just turned into a cover crop. I tore the peas out and just planted a cover crop in it and raised some pretty good corn on it the next year. But that's the thing with organic. Some years you just have to kind of roll with the punches. And sometimes by May or June you might be on plan B, C, or D. But you just have to kind of keep an open mind to it.
I mean, I think sometimes that's the case for any kind of farming. There's always B,
Yes.
C, or D, right? Especially with
Yes.
markets and prices and weather and all of it. So, Vicky, what do you like? I mean, we've kind of talked about your rotations already, but you want to elaborate a little bit more and also share like what have you considered that didn't work?
I do think I tried planting with a spreader. That does not work. I will probably never do that again. That was a waste of time, money, and seed. I do like the direct no-till seeding best. I think I will find a farmer and pay extra for that no matter what. I am very excited about buckwheat. I think it fits really nicely in a rotation. I do like the pollinator. I probably will have a beekeeper come out and put some hives. So that for me is another value added market. And that buckwheat works really well in a rotation. The soil needs to be warm. So you'd either be taking off corn or soy and can go right into it. It's a fast growing crop. The seed heads don't mature all at once, which is kind of bad and kind of good because now you have 3 chances to harvest instead of one. It does produce a lot of green matter, and the little heart-shaped leaves are super cute. So I'm a huge fan of buckwheat.
Ah, well, here we go. The next topic of disdain, the one that we hear so much about, especially crop production, a lot more so I think than grain. But record keeping has a really bad rap. A lot of people think that having to keep records, create systems to keep records, and then go through that inspection process and go through the audit, and that's enough to turn people off from considering organic. Like that's enough. That outweighs the price premium, that and weeds. So I'm curious how, keeping these records that are required for transition, how does that show up, in your day-to-day work? Because a lot of farmers, I think when they first start, imagine that it's like a big push at the end. And usually that doesn't work very well. Your inspector doesn't love that when you wait until the end to produce all of these records that you were supposed to have been keeping. So just out of curiosity, like what systems or habits do you use now that make that record keeping element a little bit easier?
I take pictures of stuff. So I take pictures of all my receipts. I take pictures of all my seed tags. I take pictures of my I'm often taking pictures of what I'm doing in case I forget. And I just have like a code word, and I email myself every day what I did that day. And that's basically how we've been doing all our records. I'll be like, I'll just have an email that says like, and I know it's that day, so I'll just be like, code word in the subject line, field 2 north, you know, cultivated, what, and then the lot number of the crop. All our lot numbers are like, you know, SB SB 26 soybeans 26 2026. So, or like yellow corn 26, or, black beans 26 or whatever. So I'll be like, cultivated SB 26, so many hours, or so many acres, if I didn't get the whole field done. Um, and so I just have a ton of those. And then when it comes time to do the audit, the auditor usually wants to trace, or the inspector usually wants to trace one crop through the whole system. So I just go into my Gmail and I put in, SB 26, and then all of my records come up as email. So they want to know how we prep the field, and I can just click on those, and then say, here we cultivated here, and here's where we harvested. Oh, we didn't harvest the whole thing. Here's where we finished harvesting, and then we use QuickBooks for financial stuff. And we have, we've got like little pieces of paper that we put on anything that's not like a grain bin, with tape, or like in a little slot, or writing it on, anytime like something's tested, if we're testing for moisture or something, we're writing that on there. um and and that's initially we paid for a system, um a record keeping system, and that was great, but it meant at the end of working all day, then we had to go home and sit down at the computer and enter it all in the system, and it just was not sustainable. So this is where we are now.
It's a little bit of digital and ad hoc. You got a little bit of Sharpie, a little bit of iPhone.
Yeah, for me it all has to be searchable, because if it's not a piece of paper that's not like taped to my forehead, it could be anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my system very similar to Molly. I take pictures of everything. When I first started out, I thought having, a pen and notepad in every tractor, write down what you're doing, the date and stuff. But that works. But if my dad's in the tractor, or my brother, or one of us forgets, and then it's 2 weeks later, and then we don't have dates. So basically, what I do, or what we do, is we take pictures of everything. Anytime we're in a piece of equipment in the field, we take a picture, typically, facing backwards so we can see what we're pulling. And then in my phone, it geotags the date, time, and location. So I can go back in, after planting season, when I'm updating my records, I can go back in and basically follow the whole planting season just through pictures on my phone. And if I have questions on, well, I don't, I can't remember what field that was in, I look at the geotag and I can pretty easily figure it out. Um, so we take pictures of everything, and I know, the record keeping process can seem overwhelming just getting into it. But like anything, once you've done it for a little bit, it's not bad. It just becomes part of what you do, daily, weekly, monthly. I have a little field activity sheet that I made, that I print off, and it just shows, field name, acres, what piece of equipment is in the field, the date, just basically what you're doing. And I just follow that, do one of those sheets for every single time, we do a pass in the field. Um, I'm kind of old school. All my records are paper. Each field has its own individual folder in it. So basically I can trace, go by field, year by year, and trace the crop start to finish. Um, but yeah, the phone, I found it is a super easy way, to keep records on what you're doing. I also wanted to mention real quick, um, if you have any questions on record keeping or products or any of that stuff, call your inspector. These guys, even if it's a silly, stupid question, call your inspector, and they will be more than happy to help you out, or direct you anyways, in whatever direction you're going. Also, the same goes for before you add any fertility to your field. I would call your inspector and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about applying X, Y, and Z to my field. My fertilizer salesman says it's OMRI approved, it's good to go." Well, call your inspector because there might be use restrictions on that or whatever. I know last summer I had a few Canadian thistle patches in an in-row that I just couldn't get rid of, and so I sprayed a organic herbicide called Demise on it, and the my I had a fertilizer salesman try to sell me another organic herbicide, and he said, "Oh yeah, we use it on fields all the time." Well, I called my certifier and they said, yeah, that herbicide is approved for organic cropping systems, but you can only spray it in like it's like you can only spray it in like road ditches and driveways. So it was not approved for field use. But that's just, if I hadn't called my certifier, I would have never known that, and that would have been a huge issue come audit and inspection season. So I just, I tell, anyone that's just getting into organic, any questions at all, or if you're before you apply anything to your field, just call your inspector and run it by them, and they'll do all the checks and tell you if there's anything you need to do or don't do with it.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the double check. Um and on the flip side to that, I will say, and don't quote me on this with your inspector, but in and especially when it comes to like in applying unapproved substances. But I have found too that inspectors, especially in your first years, are pretty generous with their patients when it comes to records. If they want to help you succeed, as opposed, they're not necessarily looking to to fail you, right? And so if you didn't get the exact record that you needed, they give you the opportunity to go recreate it or to help. And I at least our inspectors have been very helpful in that too. It's not an instant fail when you have that. And I think, the record keeping can feel like this huge burden. But like you said, once you create a system for it, it actually just becomes part of your day. And if you do make that mistake, as long as it's not an erroneous mistake, like applying something you're not supposed to be applying on your field or what have you, they're usually willing to work with you and teach you how to create a system too. I've found if you get a good inspector, they'll be like, you should, my other farmers do this to retain that data. And so, Vicky.
Yeah, even if you don't have an inspector yet, because you're still in the transition period and you haven't decided who you're going to use, just pick one and call them and ask them, and then write down
Absolutely.
what they tell you. Because then if anybody questions it later, you can say, I called Moza on this day and I talked to so and so and they told me this. And even though inspectors sometimes have different takes on interpreting the rules, you can at least we started calling Moza day one. We didn't pay them any money for 3 years. They started answering our questions. And so that's my advice if you're still in the transition period. It's not like you have to commit to somebody. You're not giving them their firstborn child, but they'll still answer your question.
Yeah. Yep. Vicky, what are your tricks? What are your secrets to keeping good records? Because you're fresh on this too, so you haven't had an opportunity to get lazy and slack on some of that stuff, like maybe some other organic farmers have. I'm pointing it at myself, not my other two panelists, by the way. But yeah, what's working for you? Mm, you're on mute. Thank you.
Keep it very simple. I save my seed tags. I use reputable seed like Albert Lee. I, have an agronomist there that knows I'm transitioning, so I'm always looking for guidance from her. And then I just have a simple spreadsheet. I keep thinking I need more, but I'm not putting anything in. So I think I'm just really lucky right now that it's very simple, very manageable. And I don't have a certifier, but thank you, Molly, for those tips. I always feel like if I'm not paying them, I can't ask them any questions.
Oh,
And it's
I
so
think
hard to choose.
they love to talk about what they know than to tell you what to do. I don't know. I don't mean that in a negative way. They just really they're good at it. You know, they're good at teaching. They're teachers as well as inspectors. Put it that way. I'm taking a look at the time. You know, I just want to maybe briefly just talk about that community aspect because sometimes, you know, farming organically can feel really isolating, especially in Illinois. There's not a lot of organic grain farmers out there. Um, so I'm curious, what community connections do you feel like are really important for grain farmers, specifically in the Midwest, where we don't have a lot of resources? It's changing, I feel like. It's changing, but it wasn't it was more scarce, I think, before, 20 years ago for sure. But what do you feel like, if you were going to talk to some farmers who were just starting to consider transitioning or were in that process, or even ones who are like, hell no, I'm not going to do that, who are somehow watching this video, what kind of community connections would you recommend? What do you feel like is really important?
Yeah, I think, there's a number of fantastic conferences throughout the winter time, and I think that's a great place to at least get your foot in the door and talk with people. What one thing I've learned, kind of in my journey as an organic farmer, is organic farmers are very willing to talk and share with you. They will tell you what worked and what didn't work. Like I said, they'll share their successes and their complete failures without hesitation. They're very willing to share and help people. And I think, these conferences and stuff are a great opportunity to meet people and also to ask questions. That's one thing I wish I would have done better when I was just starting out is I was very, very hesitant to ask stupid questions. And in my head, I was like, well, I'll just figure it out later. It'll be fine. It's not. And there is no thing as a stupid question. And if you have a question on anything, the person you're asking has probably either asked that same question or thought of it before. So these conferences, these webinars, there's all sorts of great resources that you can go to. There's a couple different Facebook groups for organic growers that are a fantastic resource for like in-season questions. I've leaned on that a little bit, and everyone in those groups are more than willing and more than happy to help you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's pretty incredible actually, I think, how Facebook and Instagram has so many different organic farmers and community groups that support each other in that way that you maybe don't see in other industries.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that I mean, we started having like, connections to chefs in Chicago, which was great when we managed to grow something to sell, but we didn't have as many connections to other farmers. So we initially joined a farm marketing co-op that was really great for making connections with other people who were growing organic row crops. Um, Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore, but there is a larger national marketing co-op called O'Grain. Um, and and we got a mentor through Moses, though the Land Connection is now also doing mentorship as so that's great. Lots of you who are on here might already be have taken that wonderful step. That was very helpful for us. I mean, I think our mentor, you know, talked to us for 2 years for his whatever his tiny stipend was. Um, the Organic Grain Conference in Madison is fantastic. That didn't exist when we started, but it's been super helpful for meeting other farmers and the learning about their mistakes, so that we don't have to do the same, make the same ones. Um, Also, the Idea Farm Network is a like a listserv. Anybody can join and email out a question, and you usually get responses from somebody else who's dealt with that same issue. Will Glazik, that's the network that Will Glazik started. Um, and the Artisan Grain Collaborative also didn't exist when we started. All these things I wish existed when we started. Those that's been great for food grade grains or brewing grade grain, sharing information, sales, because there are members who are on the baking or brewing or distilling end, and yeah, so those have all been really really important connections for us. There are not as many milling connections, and the millers that do exist often are not like looking to do a whole bunch of buying, unfortunately. And some of them will have the capacity to do custom milling, and some don't. And so that is, um, you know, walking that line, finding a way to get things milled or to market things to people who are milling their own has always been difficult for us as like it's just a barrier to food grade stuff. So much of a barrier that I probably have 50 pounds of wheat in my freezer, but I just placed an order with Meadowlark for flour to bake my bread. So anyway, true confessions. As somebody who started farming partly to bake my own bread, I'm now just ordering it from somebody else because it's so much easier. So
That's totally fair. I have another farmer's root vegetables in my fridge, even though I could and did grow them myself this year. I just never harvested them and got them out of the field. So totally fair, Molly. Yeah. Vicki, again, I love that you're here with us, and because so many of these relationships are brand new for you, you're right on the cut. What helped? What helped get you started? Because you were new to this community.
So new. TOPS. Let's start with the beginning. USDA, getting into TOPS, connecting with the USDA, getting my mentor, Paul, who was local, which helped a lot because not only is he, knows the land, but he knew a lot of my neighbors who I didn't know. So he said, call this. And then once I met my contract farmer, I met the man across the street. And then I have conventional farmers always coming over and asking, like, what are you doing? Is it working? So I do feel there's a camaraderie if you open yourself up to it. But I do say like TOPS, USDA, and then all these conferences that come in when, farming slows down, O-Grain, the Land Connections one, there was a specialty crop one in Springfield. There's so many that no matter where you live in Illinois or what times of the month work best for you, if you can make it to one of those, and there's always sponsorships, like if you need money for hotel or travel. I know the Artisan Grain Collaborative offers stipends. So take advantage of all those organizations willing to help you. There's just so many great people you'll meet and so many resources, and one thing leads to another.
Yeah. And I'll just add, as someone who has attended and loves attending conferences, it's one of my favorites because I love getting away from the farm and talking to people, is that it's really encouraged and accepted. I think it's an accepted practice to walk up to complete strangers at conferences and start talking about your farm and asking about their farm. Like it might sound weird, but if you can get out of your bubble and go join other bubbles, you learn so much. I wouldn't say and going to visit other farms, whether they're grain farms or specialty crop farms, it does not matter. Going to see other farms and looking at their equipment, looking at their setup.
Go to all the field days.
And go to all the field days. Yeah.
As many of the field days as you could possibly drive to.
I'm also going to put a little stamp on the Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, which started with Sam Oshwald Tilton, and Land Connection now partners with him. And this year it's going to be in Michigan. So if anybody has an opportunity, it's both specialty crops and grain of all different sizes. If you have the opportunity to go, you get to see on-farm demos in the field and talk to all the equipment dealers, and there's usually ice cream sandwiches. Like, hello ice cream sandwiches, and it's back on the farm at the University of in Michigan, so it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool setup.
Yeah, I also want
Okay.
to plug the research, the organic research farm at Western Illinois University for anybody who's within driving distance there. They do a great field day, and also their staff is just super knowledgeable. They've been doing they've got a 10-acre organic research farm that they have been working on different rotations and stuff with for a long time now. I mean, like 20 or 25 years maybe. So it's a long running project, and the field day is free. The professor's great. So plug for them. But I feel like in Illinois that's unusual. You know, you get up in Wisconsin and Minnesota, there's a lot more university resources for organic. Um, anyway, we're down here.
Well, and I think the other thing that's challenging in Illinois, but also in the Midwest, is, um, marketing food grade, not feed grade, food grade grain. And all of you are growing food grade grain in one way or another. And so, my question for you, I guess, my last question before I want to open this up to the audience is I see things changing and moving, but there's still a tremendous need for what? What do we need to grow the food grade small grain movement here in Illinois and specifically, but also in the Midwest? What do you feel like you need?
I would say education. The more the consumer knows about these products, what their attributes are, what makes them different, they will start seeking it out. They'll start asking their grocers, where can I buy this? Do you have this? And
Why
hopefully
do I?
the co-ops are very open to accepting, farm grown products, and we have a story to tell.
And we saw so much of that around COVID too, Vicky. I know that was around the time I think that you got started as well, but that there was this resurgence of baking and using ingredients that were locally grown and milled, and I think we can go back to that. Yeah. What else is needed to make this viable? To make this so that we have jobs that we can offer people, we have next generations coming onto a farm, and what do we need?
I think from the at least from the farmer side of the food grade market. I raise food grade white corn and food grade oats, and I've grown food grade soybeans before. From the farmer side, and this is probably the case in a lot of organic, but especially in food grade, on-farm storage is a must, and that's a big capital expenditure. Especially, I'm still am a relatively small farmer, and so that, the having access to on-farm storage is essential because a lot of the local food grade buyers, at least me, there's Clarkson and Cerro Gordo and in Mattoon, and then I sell a lot of white corn to Anderson's in Mansfield, Illinois. Um, but all those places are 70 miles one way from my farm, and those are the close ones. So, having on-farm storage is key because a lot of these buyers too, it's a typically with grains, it's a 12-month buyer's call window. So you'll contract grain and you don't it's not guaranteed you'll hold on to it for 12 months, but there's a chance, you might have, they'll come and get, a load or two a month, for a year or something. So having that access to on-farm storage is a huge part of it, which is tough because grain bins are expensive. You have to maintain them. There's a little bit of an art to storing grain. It's not rocket science, but there is, some nuances with it. But that's, my experience in the food grade market. Storage has been absolutely crucial.
So Seneca Murley is in the audience, and she was a presenter last week and has some really nice software options for monitoring grain in bins that maybe she'll come on. I can't remember the name of it. It's a Centaur, maybe Seneca. Is that right? Is it Centaur?
Yeah, it is Centaur. Although I still preface it that I don't feel like it's still a little bit in beta mode for it. But I would agree with you, Shane, that it is an art and a science to grain conditioning and drying, and you can't just put it in there and just think it's fine for sure. And especially with food grade, and the moistures that you're typically harvesting. And you're right. Um, I've held grain all the way into July and August, which is super hard, because bugs really have had bug problems, holding it that long. And that's what, good bins, right? So it's just
Yeah.
a challenge. Yeah, it's a real challenge. But key, but absolutely key. I don't think you could grow food grade corn, especially,
No.
without having on-farm storage.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Tzedakah.
I
Yeah.
actually think that just farming organic is basically impossible without our on-farm storage
Yeah.
for
Mhm.
us anyway, because we don't have, even on the rare chance that ADM or somebody is filling an organic barge, and we're by the Illinois River, so we're not that far of a drive to the barges, but like you can't take it straight out of the combine and take it there. It's only there's like one or 2 days a year that they're doing that. You have to have on farm storage
Yep.
or some access to storage somehow. You gotta be able to store it if you want to be able to sell it. I think that in my experience, some of the things that haven't been mentioned yet that are essential are cleaning capacity, um, like cleaning capacity at the right size has been hard for us because again we're fairly small. We ended up having to get our own cleaning stuff, but then it's small scale cleaning. So then when we have larger quantities of stuff, then it's not big enough to handle that, and finding somebody who can do it anyway. Getting it there, getting it cleaned, getting it home, getting it bagged. Sometimes you have to clean it before you test it to make sure that it's food grade for vomitoxin or aflatoxin. And then you're cleaning it, and do we bag it or not? And do they have space to hold it? Anyway, cleaning and testing, cleaning and quality testing have been two of the sort of like just logistical barriers to growing food grade. And then again, the getting it into the form that the consumer, that the customer wants it. If you it's great selling directly, but for instance, if you're milling corn, you have to have a place for the corn flour to go because everybody wants cornmeal, but what do you do with all the corn flour that's left over? It's sort of the classic scenario. So that those are some of the, I'd love to sell all my flour to my local hospital, but and they would have to be able to buy it all at once, or it has to go to cold storage somewhere. The nearest cold storage is 40 miles away after it's milled. So yeah, storage, cleaning, cold storage after things are milled, testing, cleaning and testing. And I don't know who you all have used for testing. We have used Illinois Crop Improvement, but it's always like package some up, ship it down there, wait for a while, then find out. And then meanwhile, the stuff is sitting in the truck. Is it going to be food grade? Is it not going to be food grade? Is it going to be food grade? Is it not going to be food grade? So
I just envision a lot of opportunity there in those spaces of education and storage and testing and milling and cold storage and distribution, like that whole piece. I envision there's a lot of opportunity for some collaboration. Yeah, it's not unfixable. It just needs some dedicated funding.
yeah, the delivery logistics also, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't run to Chicago for 50 pounds of beans.
Yeah.
Well, I would make sure that I leave some time for our audience to hear from you guys. So, what's coming up for anybody that's listening tonight? Do you have any comments or anything you want to add or questions for our panelists? Anything you're curious about?
I do have a question, actually. I don't know if others are putting theirs in their chat, but is it okay to vocalize
Oh,
one?
yes, please.
Okay, good. Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm over in Michigan. And I am helping right now to organize a regenerative farm network, as will be funded through our MDARD, our state agricultural agency, and sponsored by our Jackson County Soil District, although some of the farms will be a little bit farther away. They have to be in Michigan, but they don't have to be within the county. And so this is a pilot project just to get a network going of farmers who are interested in testing regenerative practices. And we're going to focus specifically on cultivating some food grade grains as part of that. I'm an artisan baker, so I am like all about this, like helping me connect with farmers and get those grains that I want. And I feel everything everybody is saying about the missing pieces of the supply chain, the grain chain and processing, because it's definitely a huge part of the challenge. Anyway, my question is just like what we have to come up with a regime to to try like something to, and I just wondered because this is a pilot and for some people this will be their first step into trying organic or regenerative farming on some part of their farm. Like what's something that's like small and might be successful and scalable that we could try for like a crop rotation or some crops that people might recommend?
I mean, how small are we talking?
So like I mean, the scale in terms of involved, like there'll be at least 5 farms involved in the first year, but there is no minimum acreage as stipulated by the grant. So, they can, the farms can decide themselves how much they want to allocate. They'll get reimbursed to some degree for participating, but so we have a goal of at least 100 acres planted with the pilot just so that we get some and in different places so that we can like through the soil testing and everything else get some results that hopefully show some improvements, even though again this will just be 1 year for the first pilot. But we'd also like to get some things out of it that are marketable, so as well as get some soil health going.
Hmm. Yeah, are you looking like for farmers to grow row crops or small grains or some sort of combination of both of them with, maybe some like interseeded cover crops in it? I mean,
Yeah.
I,
I think what you would think it like to me that sounds like it would be the most successful just from like an agricultural and ecological practice because there's no definition of what exactly anyone has to grow. Like we have to kind of propose what we would all consider together to be successful. And since you all have had quite a bit of trial and error experience, I thought you might have some ideas for things to use as either cover or as the crops that would be like a good pilot and show some like good results in terms of the soil health over even like not that long of a period and be manageable for farmers who are also managing the rest of their like commercial farms.
I would say first of all that I would focus on something that like try to have everybody grow the same thing so that they can all sell it together and find some way to provide a market for it. So if like everybody's going to grow um I don't know, like if everybody's going to grow wheat or something and then you have someplace and then you organize to take it all and get it all milled and all used by the local hospital, or take it all to someplace that can use it. um that we always try to say like don't plan anything until you know how you're going to get rid of it, because we've made that mistake a few times.
mhm.
But I think that the if you're really looking for quick results, the thing you're going to find the quickest results with is something that adds a lot of biomass. So doing like a small grain with an undercrop of clover, like you know, red clovers or some kind of clover mix, where you're going to see just like a lot of biomass added. You're going to see a lot of insect activity. Um, that's and it's also like, after it's been in the ground with a winter crop, like, you put it in there, you might tie and weed a little bit, but once you plant your intercrop, you kind of have to leave it, so it's a lot less work. Though a lot of people, if they're not already growing a small grain, sometimes people don't like to get the combine out in the middle of the year, in the middle of summer. Um, but if the more biomass you can add, the more dramatic effects you're going to see in the short run.
That makes a lot of sense. We were definitely yes to everybody is going to agree to grow the same crops just to like, to have it be like easier to manage. And also then it's kind of like the data will be a little bit more uniform. And then definitely yes to clover, I think. And we were just wondering, and I would love to see us try to do like a hard wheat just because it's so great. And I know I can market that. But I was wondering if there would be anything else that would kind of work within a rotation like that that you've just seen like a lot of success with. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think wheat's a great option. I mean, I raised organic wheat for years, and I quit raising it simply because I was getting my soybeans out too late, to where it was really hard to get wheat planted in the fall in a timely manner. So I switched to oats. Like I said, in some, every year's different. In the spring times, that has its own challenges getting the oats in the ground. But honestly, the oats have been a really good small grain for me to grow. They're pretty resilient, pretty hardy, honestly pretty easy to grow too. There's not a lot of babysitting involved with them. Um, whatever, if you do a small grain underseeded with a clover or something, I would recommend, if you can, planting a tall variety of small grain, just in case that whatever you plant underneath it, ends up being the same height as the grain you're harvesting, because that can pose some pretty significant challenges at harvest.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we had talked about oat and clover and then a wheat possibly, or sorghum and clover and a wheat, just because I mean, well, I love sorghum. I know some people in the area have had some good experience growing that, but that's very helpful recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, like,
Barley.
whatever you're growing, make sure you have a food grade. If you're trying to go for food grade, um, make sure you have a feed sales option. So some way you can get rid of it if it doesn't make the grade.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. And that's probably likely to happen some places down the road. So that's, yeah, good call. Thank you.
Vicky, what were you going to add?
I would say ooh, again, I'm on mute.
Nope, you're good.
Barley. I like
Oh
barley.
yeah, I love that.
I don't know if you need a dehuller though.
I do happen to have access to someone who has a barley dehuller, so I think we could work something out. Yeah.
Can I have their name?
You want to put that in the chat? That would be Josh. That would be awesome.
The
Yeah,
barley is
I'm learning about all of the haulers that are needed to process it and who has them. I have like a mental hauling map that I'm developing. But yeah, I will yes, for sure.
Thank you. Well, speaking of
if you're
equipment, oh, go ahead, Vicky.
if
Were you
you're a
going to say
baker,
something?
I'm excited to see what you grow and do with it.
Yeah, you'll have to
And we're in
report
the
back.
Artisan Grain Collaborative.
Yes. Yeah, I'm in the AGC too, and yeah, I'm really excited. I think there's so much opportunity to like. I love the idea of this like network model, just for the knowledge sharing and just like building a community of people who are learning together. I think it actually does make a lot of sense. So it should be cool.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Josh. So
Yeah, thank
speaking
you.
of equipment,
Question in the chat. Yeah.
yeah, speaking of equipment, Chris wants to know the uses, advantages, and disadvantages of a rotary hoe versus a time reader.
Sure. I think they definitely both have a place. Chris, you can give me a call anytime in June, and once I've ran a rotor, or once I ran a tine weeder, and I'll be able to tell you what I like and don't like about it. But I mean, for my limited experience, but just from talking with other farmers, the tine weeder is a bit more aggressive, and actually, it can flick established, standing weeds up out of, in the row and in between the row versus, the rule I've always used with the rotary hoe is if you can see the weed, the rotary hoe is not going to get it. With the rotary hoe, it flicks out weeds when they're in the white thread stage, they're barely visible to the eye. So, I mean, I think both tools definitely have a place in organics, but I think the tine weeder is a little bit more aggressive. I think my opinion is you can probably run a tine weeder a little later in season than you can a rotary hoe. I've seen guys, tie tines up that are over the rows and run a tine weeder in, 6-inch tall corn or 8-inch tall soybeans. So I think that's a huge advantage. A disadvantage of the tine weeder is they do not like residue. I know rotary hoes, some handle residue better than others, but a tine weeder is essentially just a big rake almost. So if you have a lot of corn stubble or anything like that out there, it will drag up and ball up on you. So so residue management might have to be different in a system where you're running a tine weeder versus a rotary hoe.
Anybody else, participants as well, if want to add anything? That's a farmers have their opinions about equipment. This I know. So
Oh, I'll just add on that question. This is Seneca. It just takes longer to run the tine weeder too. You can get across a lot more ground faster on a rotary hoe than you can a tine weeder. So, in my situation, it's quite heavier. So I kind of deploy a smaller tractor with the rotary hoe and the tine weeder, I kind of put in a bigger field but I know it's going to take 2, 3 times longer. So if you've only got one tractor and those two things, you're definitely, you need to get across ground in these small windows that we have. The rotary hoe to start off with really does, get you across, right? But I think,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, those are the trade-offs, I think, and I agreed. We've had a lot of residue problems with our tine weeder. So it's, the corn residue for us, because I participate in a lot of cover crop programs with these windows where I have to plant, and then I can't work the ground. And so I can't work down that corn residue in the fall. So it's become an issue, really has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working on ways to try and fix it and still stay in the cover crop programs. And one thing I'm looking at is it's a corn stalk puller. That some of the organic folks have been talking about that they've been pulling alfalfa and planting corn into standing alfalfa. This was done out in Nebraska, and people are kind of looking at it again. Anyways, I'd love it for it to work in Illinois. I have my doubts, but I think irrigation is probably a lot makes that system work better, but I don't know. We'll see. I can't get my hand on a row crop puller right now without buying it new, which I don't really want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the chat, Amanda says we recently upgraded to an offset rotary hoe where the wheels aren't all in a row. Game changer for avoiding residue or rocks that get stuck.
Mm.
Yeah, I've heard of offset rotary hose, and I've seen a couple videos online about them, and they look like a really nice upgrade to a conventional hoe.
Mhm.
Well, you guys, we are at 7:30. If anybody else has any questions you want to throw it in the chat, we can try and address those quickly. But I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to our panelists for sharing so honestly about the realities of organic grain farming. Really grateful for the work that you're doing and the willingness to share your evening with us, especially when you have jobs and kids and families and work and all that. So thank you to everybody who enjoyed and joined us this evening. I wanted to let you know I'm going to be sending out the recording in a couple days. And also just a very short, got to do it for grants, a very short assessment. It'll take you 30 seconds to fill it out. I'm going to send it over email. If you guys could just do two or three quick answers, it's anonymous, that would be fantastic. And then lastly, we have one more webinar in the webinar series. On March 3rd, we have a panelist of farmers from O Farm, which is not the same as O Grain. O Farm is completely different. And they're going to be talking about marketing, everything from how to have a great crop in the field to how to cash your check. Basically, the whole spectrum. And that's going to be a really good one too. So that's on March 3rd. It is also free thanks to funding through TOP, and you can register online for that as well. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.